All right, another bombshell book detailing more revelations about the Biden White House. One claim, Hunter Biden begged the DNC to cover his ballooning legal bills for tax and gun charges. The party denied the requests, even as it footed the bill for his dad's classified documents defense. Let's bring in Mark Thiessen now, Fox News contributor. Mark, great to see you today. So what do you make of these new revelations?
Sandra. Well, first of all, what's fascinating to me is not only was Joe Biden cognitively declined, but he was also deeply distracted in the presidency by his son. He told a friend, the only thing I care about is that he's not convicted. Not that we secure the border, not that we tame inflation, not even that we win the election. He was sole concern was that his son not go to jail. And the other thing that was just obvious is that, of course, Hunter Biden was pushing him to run because he was a grifter and he was making money off of this. The book says that his main source of income were his paintings, which we were selling for up to $500,000 a piece. Who was going to pay him $500,000 for a painting if his father wasn't president? I'd like to know how many paintings he sold for $500,000 since January 20th of this year. I suspect the answer is zero. So the grift was on, and Hunter was at the core of it.
This is an excerpt from the book, 2024, How Trump Retook the White House and the Democrats Lost, on Hunter watching that now infamous debate when everything changed, Mark. It reads, Hunter watched the debate from his home in Los Angeles, and his reaction was, what the F? He had never seen his father so out of it and worried about his well-being. A few days later, when Hunter arrived at Camp David for a visit, he told his father, I love you, and get some sleep. I wonder what else he told him, Mark.
Yeah, you had to be on drugs not to know that Joe Biden was cognitively impaired. I mean, truly, the idea that that was the first time he had ever seen his father that out of it. Are you kidding me? The American people had seen his father that out of it over and over again, just in smaller snippets. What that debate was showing the American people what everybody else in Biden world saw behind the scenes that we were not allowed to see. What Joe Biden was really like when you had to sit with him for an hour and a half and have a policy discussion with him. That's what he was like in the Oval Office. That's what he was like to the rest of the world. That's what he was like with his family. And that's why they limited his media appearances. That's why, he only took a few questions here and there from the media. It's because they limited it. So the idea that Hunter Biden was surprised by his father's debate performance is just, yeah, I won't say the word.
We got you. Picking up what you're laying down. Josh Dawsey, who penned the Wall Street Journal piece, How Hunter Biden Helped Derail His Father's Re-Election, said this on ABC's This Week. This was Sunday. Listen.
Hunter Biden had a major figure in the president's orbit. He was often on these calls. He would pipe in to calls. He was helping him make campaign decisions. And the president was very concerned about his son. It was one of the things that was an albatross on him as he tried to run for re-election.
And so, I mean, perhaps Hunter was part of pushing his dad up on that stage. I mean, Josh Dawsey says in that piece that Joe Biden's debate against Trump was supposed to prove the aging president's stamina. It did obviously quite the opposite, Mark.
Yeah, so that debate was elder abuse. They were all gathered in Camp David for like 10 days before that debate practicing. And you think that was everybody who was around him during those debate practices was surprised by what they saw there. They just didn't want to acknowledge reality that this guy couldn't do the job. He couldn't have the debate. So, this was a conspiracy, one of the worst political scandals in my lifetime. You had politicians, you had the president's family who lied to the American people about the possibility that this man could serve another 4 years as president of the United States. Because for the family, it was the grift. For the political aides, it was their political future. And also they feared Donald Trump. Yeah. So they consciously lied to the American people about this man's condition.
And they had big hitters in his ear. I mean, this is an excerpt from the book as well. Obama's message to Biden's senior staff. He stopped to visit with Biden's senior staff, many of whom used to work for him, shared his account of what he and Biden had discussed. Obama was more blunt with the staff. Your campaign is a mess. Mark, final thought.
Yeah, then the person I really want to hear from is his doctor, because his doctor is going to testify, is going to do a deposition to Congress. By a year before the debate in June 2023, 68% of Americans said they were concerned about Biden's mental health, but his doctor wasn't. His doctor, who saw him almost on a daily basis, didn't think he needed a cognitive test, didn't think he needed a PSA test. What kind of a doctor is this? Was he? And it sounds like he was in on the cover-up as well. It was obvious to every American, but it wasn't obvious to a medical professional who was entrusted with his care. That's what I'd like to see.
His former physician is set to testify Wednesday. These are the former Biden staffers that have also been called to testify, Mark. We know that we will be hearing more and learning more about who knew what about President Biden and when. All right, we'll be watching for that. Mark, great to have you on the program. Good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, John.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.